Hey everybody, happy Sunday. I hope that you've been able to make the most of this holiday weekend and able to enjoy it with your friends and family. You know, so many people, you like me, are frustrated by the moving target that COVID presents, the continual changing public policies and the requests and the requirements that are asked of us. And one thing I'm sure of, as you are, is that we are in a history-shifting event. The way we think about our personal rights and our responsibilities to others, the way our workplaces and public environments are going to operate, we are sure that things have permanently changed. And in this time, there's been two questions that have been consuming me in these 4 months in our new current normal. First question is this: how has this experience changed me? You know, I'm someone whose day-to-day hasn't been all that affected by this semi-quarantine. Unlike a elderly loved one in our congregation who hasn't been out of her apartment in 102 days and she's counting. You know, it's not these external things that I can't control that I'm worried about. It's the way that those things begin to impact me internally. Am I living more fearfully, or am I becoming more loving? Am I angry and frustrated, or am I pressing into God's peace? Am I obstinate, or am I becoming more compassionate? Most importantly, am I engaging, or am I defaulting into isolation? Here's what's important to remember: that what affects me internally shapes me eternally. It's wanting to reinforce the Christ-likeness in me in this moment, or am I reinforcing the meanness of me? Because that's all I know. What is happening is that I need to become more like Jesus, and my focus, since He's unchanging, isn't unchanging. And it's not a proof of my devotion or proving to God of my determination or my durability to endure things. What I have to come to grips with is the answer to my first question. Being a Christ follower requires me to be someone who changes, who embraces transformation, not just an event or an experience, but it is a journey, a process, which leads me to the second question: what hasn't been changing? What hasn't been changing is God and the three things that He uses to shape me: community, authenticity, and intimacy. Here at Hill's known as 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. So let's start with community, this thing we call the church, the part of His body that He's assigned us to. You know, God first identified a people, and in that process, He invited them to come together to be able to practice what it is like to live in the kingdom of us, so that we would know how to live it out beyond those gatherings. And even though we've not been gathering, some of us have even begun to wonder if church going is even necessary. And we don't realize that the viewpoint that question comes from is even self-serving in the fact that it's asking, what does it do for me? Because we forget that church is not something we do. Church is something that we are. COVID has shown us that church is more than just buildings and events and gatherings. It's a group of people who are placed together so that we can practice being loving, practice caring for one another, and breaking our addiction to self-centered living. In these days when our programs and activities are restricted, I want to tell you that the church is more important than ever, because caring for those in your spiritual family and in your physical family is more important. And in this time of isolation, we're discovering how intentional we have to be about building relationships and maintaining relationships and including other people in our lives. This brings us to the second one in our equation: authenticity, doing life with others. You know, even those who appear to be the most self-sufficient require deep connection with others at the heart level. And while the means of our connecting has changed, meeting on Zoom instead of at Starbucks, a phone call instead of maybe a barbecue at the house, most of us need a weekly point of personal contact with others who bring Jesus out in us. What COVID has done is shown us how intentional we have to be about inviting and including others into our lives. Which brings us to the last one, which is intimacy, a daily meeting with Jesus. You know, what's funny is that because so many of our daily routines have been disrupted, I'm finding that many people have struggled to maintain any kind of ongoing place for their personal relationship with Jesus. How is it that in this time when we have more control of our own schedules than ever, the one thing that keeps getting neglected is consistent time for prayer and hearing from God in His Word? For example, 80% of Christians have never read the Bible cover to cover, but there's a reading plan out there that would help you to do that in only 90 days, and it only requires about 20 minutes of reading a day. In our prayer life, especially during crisis times like this, many of us are asking for God's help in some area of our lives. But what if we could flip that around and start asking Him where He wants us to help and partner with Him? Two things are certain to me. Things have changed, but God hasn't. And as we are settling into this new normal, we can't bring the old us into this new thing. So let's not live by default. Let's grow. Let's change. And change for a Christ follower involves three things: an intimate relationship with God, an intimate relationship with friends who are sharing the journey, and the right information so that we can align our lives to God's will and purposes. And these things require more than just my agreement or my availability. It requires my participation and my engagement and agreement. So let's make the most of the rest of the summer. I want to ask you to do three things with me. Number one, let's be the church in a new way. Can we develop our serving muscles and mindset by reaching out to others in our congregation? Make a call or drop a text to somebody in our church. If you need anybody's contact information, please let me know and I'll get it to you. Number two, be intentional about growing in your spiritual life. We're going to offer new online groups. We're going to provide some resources like 30 days to change and grow in my spiritual life. Find a reading plan, maybe even the 90-day one that I talked about using the Bible app. And don't remain isolated. Intentionally invite people into your life. Invent reasons to connect. Maybe a prayer partner once a week, or inviting a new Zoom group around an issue. We can't just any longer be an organization that has programs. We want to come alongside you and equip you and encourage you to be who God's created you to be. During this season, during the last half of our summer, let's stop playing church and let's start being it. 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. I love you, Hills Church. Let's make this journey of transformation and change together.